Okay, I'd like to speak briefly about Ursula Haverbeck. She passed away there on the 20th of November. And to be honest, I didn't know a lot about her case. I didn't know the specifics. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there listening to this who know a lot more about it than I do. However, I was aware that for the last number of years, she had been persecuted by the German state. And in fact, she was persecuted for 20 years. For 20 years, she was facing legal battles. She was imprisoned, I believe, a number of times. And she died at the age of 96. Some people say she died in prison. Some people say she didn't die in prison. You can let me know in the comments. But I did a search on Google, and you have a picture of her date of birth, when she died, and it says Ursula Hedwig Meta Haverbeck Wetzel was a German neo-Nazi activist from Vlotho. Since 2004, she had been the subject of multiple lawsuits and conviction. That's the Wikipedia entry that appears. And it then has the top stories. It has two headlines. From The Independent, the headline is Notorious German Holocaust Denier Ursula Haverbeck dies at 96. So they had to get into the headline first, Notorious German Holocaust Denier. Then we get the name of the woman, and then we get the information that she's recently passed on. And then the second headline is from DW. Germany, inveterate Holocaust denier Haverbeck dies at 96. So inveterate. So you got all these, I would say, nasty words used, nasty adjectives used to describe the woman. But they put in the, they put in the adjectives first and the titles first, and then you get the name, and then you get the information that she died. I do find that interesting. So, and there's even one here in Spanish. Muere a los 96 años la negacionista del Holocausto, Ursula Haverbeck. That's from Diario de Noticias de Navarra. So, and then there's another one from 20 Minutos. It says, Muere la abuela nazi Ursula Haverbeck. So even in Spanish, they're putting in the information that she was a Holocaust denier before they give you her name. And anyway, that's something I wanted to get into. Her name isn't known by most people. Young people generally don't seem to know about her, and people my age don't seem to know about her. Boomers don't seem to know about her. Nobody seems to know about her outside these small circles. And, these people who don't know about her are always talking about democracy and freedom of speech. And yet, they weren't aware that there was a 96-year-old grandmother who had spent time in prison in the last number of years for having an opinion. And it seems, from what I've gathered, I watched a few short clips about her, that Haverbeck, she started asking questions in her 70s, give or take, about the Holocaust. And she asked a number of, authoritative bodies about the Holocaust, and she wasn't given any answers. In fact, it seems that she was snubbed. She got no answers whatsoever. So she became a little bit more suspicious, and she also had her own memories because she was very young during World War II, but she did have memories as well. And her memories didn't seem to tie in with the official Holocaust narrative. So anyway, her questions were ignored, and so she started coming up with her own answers. And, the state generally, the big state, big daddy government, the nanny state, it doesn't like you coming up with your own answers, especially when they have set out their stall, and it's very lucrative for a small coterie of people. So she started asking questions got no answers, came up with her own answers, and then the hammer came down on top of her. And as I said, for 20 years, she's been through a right old battle. Her battle has finally come to an end. It's finally come to an end. So yeah, a lot of people, they talk about democracy, as I say, freedom. They watch the news and they worry about, what's going on in China, what's going on in North Korea. The poor Chinese, the poor North Koreans. If only we could transplant Western democracy to those countries, then the people would have freedom of speech, Yeah. And this comes at a time when Western leaders trot off to different parts of the world and they talk about our freedoms and our individual rights, and they rail against the Chinese government, they rail against the Russians, and all the while in their midst are hundreds, perhaps thousands of people who are thought criminals in the West and who are languishing, as I speak, in prisons because their beliefs run counter to the official and very lucrative for some belief system. Yeah, I would say what Ursula Haverbeck did was she tried to cast light on the prison within which we find ourselves. She tried to cast light on the bars of that prison. She tried to cast light on the jailers. And if you ever wish to have a sniff of freedom, you must first be aware that you're in a prison. And you must be aware that there's a very small group, an interest group, that will keep you in that prison all your life and will keep your descendants in that prison and will do its utmost to stop any whistleblowers that crop up now and then. Well, I will say this: rest in peace, Ursula Haverbeck.